This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
What's up, guys? Is that a compliment, Ira, that nobody talks NBA and Heat basketball like you and me, or is that an insult?
You know what? Yeah, like it doesn't say no one talks it best. No one talks it more accurately. No one talks it. We just talk it. They talk like us because no one else except here on the Slomin's Home Security Inside the Paint Show gives you a full hour without those 20-minute commercial breaks. We are here. We are raw. We are real. And honestly, Clay, because you probably saw this circulating yesterday. Unlike people who just throw any crap against the wall and come out and say Victor Oladipo's not on the Heat injury report, the world is changing. We also check our facts and make sure we get stuff right. So yeah, I am proud of the work we've done here, and we give you a nice home security system also. What's wrong? What can be bad with that?
So we got a lot of stuff to talk about. I mean, this is kind of the week that we've had circled on our calendar. To steal an old phrase, where you're playing the Bulls, the Bucks tonight. Ira's in beautiful Milwaukee, I assume, with that beautiful hotel backdrop behind you. Then you got the Nets, and then you got the 76ers. I mean, this is really, as far as regular season weeks go, I mean, this is it. It's your measuring stick, whatever you want to call it. I want to start off the top, though. You mentioned Victor Oladipo in that report yesterday. I feel like there was just some people making too much out of maybe an omission. But what are you hearing on the report that we heard last week that he could be back by next week, as in this week coming up next week? And what are you hearing on where he stands right now?
You know what? It's the same thing that Anthony Chang of the Miami Herald and myself have been reporting for a while now. You see this cluster on the Heat schedule. I don't know if you have a color-coded one or not at home on your refrigerator, but the Heat play 11 of 12 games in March at home. There is no better time to bring a player back and to acclimate him when you have your own training facilities, when you have ample practice time, which they've never had during the course of the season. So it always made sense. And it's always been a sense of 6 weeks is sort of the takeoff point in the NBA for positioning, for getting yourself ready, for getting what Eric Spoelstra might say to be your best self. So it always made sense after this trip, after this brutal back-to-back they have coming up here, Milwaukee, then Brooklyn tomorrow, and then Philadelphia at home. You excel a little. You have games against the Rockets. You have games against the Pistons, not to denigrate what they've done or not done. So it always made sense that would be the time. You have days off between those games, not as many back-to-backs. So yeah, I think it makes sense. I think that's why they sent him to Sioux Falls the second time for more 5-on-5. I mean, the Heat don't have 5-on-5. I can't recall the last time that they have had a situation where they've had 10 guys on the court going hard against each other. Between injuries and COVID and just older players, it doesn't happen. So it makes sense now to go in this direction.
All right, guys, make sure to smash the like button for us. That does us a huge favor, and we love for you to drive this show. So drop your questions, your comments in the chat. By the way, I agree on more nationally televised games. This Heat team is fun, and I think you're getting to the point where they have enough names to where, look, you're not talking about elite superstar names yet, but there are enough to get them on national TV a little bit more, although we love watching the stuff on Valley Sports Sun as well. So Kyle Lowry, what are you hearing on Lowry? Is this a situation similar to his previous absence where they're basically just saying, look, we're not going to update you on anything until he's back, and we're not even going to ask questions until he's ready to come back?
I mean, this is the same situation as last time, and it's a family matter. And again, Clay, it is something that you and I and Big O and anyone out there listening or watching would take time off from work also. Life happens, and life is happening right now, and Kyle has to step away and deal with something far more serious. And I know to the fans it seems dire because obviously the playoffs are 6 weeks away. Obviously, Kyle is one of the big three, or the way Tyler Hero is playing big four. But the Heat have survived, I think, 9-5 with Gabe Vincent starting in place of Kyle Lowry. It's made it easier to do the old take all the time you need. And this also goes to what you really were the first one on this with Bam when he had the knee problem. And you said, look, the thumb injury was not ideal, but it let him rest the knee. He came back a different player. I think in this case, you're looking at maybe a 35-year-old player. If he does have to step away and does miss some time right now, it's only going to keep him fresher for the games that matter. So yes, this is not a case of Kyle just walking out on his teammates. This is the same real-life situation that anyone would step away from any work to tend to, and that's what it is.
And it's funny you mentioned the Bam situation, and I think his role changes a bit with Kyle out too, because Gabe Vincent, even though he's taking on Kyle Lowry's role in the starting lineup, he's not a true point guard in the sense of the word. He's more of a scorer. So it allows Bam to kind of go back to being. And by the way, Bam's been really aggressive with the ball in his hands, attacking the basket too, which has been. I mean, you could make a legitimate case for him being Player of the Month in the Eastern Conference for February. But
except for someone who's arriving on Saturday named Joel Embiid, who statistically has been superior in every single column. But other than that, I agree.
Second best player of the month. No, but I mean, the point is he's played really, really well. And I think with Kyle Lowry out, he can go back to kind of being a little bit more of the point center, point fight. I liked how John Calipari coined the term point center a couple of years ago when we talked to him about this. Now, I don't think that's where this team is best, but I think that with Kyle Lowry out, you find a nice ceiling with Bam in that point center role and Gabe Vincent being able to do what he does best, which is shoot the ball and score. So they found like this nice kind of niche role for as long as Kyle Lowry is out. So I want to look ahead to the games coming up. And, obviously the big back-to-back starting tonight, the game coming up this weekend where you're measuring stick games. And you like that you're going into this in first place and being 2 games up. But I want to talk about the team that the Heat beat on Monday night. And, this is one of those classic cases of styles make fights. And for whatever reason this year, and even when the Heat had guys out earlier in the year, they were able to go to Chicago and win a game there. But I saw something in that game on Monday night that I thought it kind of goes back to what you were saying last week, where Eric Spoelstra will go into a lab when he has some extra time and come up with these little nuances, little twists on things that he does. And you could see this come playoff time. Jimmy Butler spent part of that first half, especially guarding Vucevic. And they had Bam Adebayo at different stretches guarding Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan. So when you're looking at this Heat team and what's going to make them so dangerous come playoff time is the ability to switch elite defenders onto really, really good offensive players. And it really doesn't matter the position, especially if you're going to get Victor Oladipo back. You could see a world where, man, if you take on Brooklyn, again, PJ Tucker loves going up against Kevin Durant. And as well, Kevin Durant's going to beat anybody, but their back and forth is fun to watch. Right. When you have a full, healthy Heat team, you have one of those rare teams that you can roll out a number of these defenders against elite offensive players and really kind of throw a wrench into what the other team's game plan was. And I really think that hurt what Chicago was planning to do early in that game. And there was a trickle-down effect as the game went on.
And Clay, it's also a case of matchup make fights, we always talk about. And it is so fascinating with the Eastern Conference being so fluid right now, how you can see a path for the Heat to the NBA Finals, pretty reasonable. And you can also see a path that's really dangerous. In other words, I could give you Nets in the first round, Bucks in the second round, Sixers in the East Finals, and you're like, uh-oh. Or I can give you Hawks in the first round, maybe the Celtics in the second round and the Bulls in the Eastern Conference Finals. It's all about how this is going to shake out. I don't think it will be choosable. I don't think in the last week of the season, if you're playing for 1 or 2, first of all, you never know who's 7 or 8. To fill people back in on the play-in, since anyone who's a Lakers fan has to know that also, maybe not a Knicks fan, after the season is over, the regular season on April 10th, the number 7 and number 8 team in the conference, the number 7 hosts the number 8. The winner of that game is the number 7 seed. The loser of that game sits out for a while. While that's going on, the 9 and 10 play. Number 10 plays at number 9. The winner of that game plays the loser of 7-8 in a one-game showdown. So when you're playing for 1 or 2, like I think the Heat will be, you don't know who 7 or 8 are going to be until the end of that week, that Thursday, maybe 2 days before you start the playoffs. So the Heat can't jockey for 1 or 2 saying, we want to avoid Brooklyn because Kyrie's playing home games now, because KD is back, because Ben Simmons is finally back in the mix also. You just don't know. It could as likely be at number 7 being Toronto, tough Heat matchup. It could possibly be Boston. It could be Atlanta. So when you're playing for 1 or 2, you're going in blind. Maybe if you're playing at number 3, maybe if Philadelphia, Milwaukee, or Chicago, 2 of those 3 pass the Heat, then you might say, okay, we know that Boston or Toronto are locked in and go from there. So I think the play-in system has kept a lot more teams involved, but it's also prevented teams in the top from sort of picking their matchups. I almost wish it could be like it's been in the G League at times, where you get to draft your opponent. Of course, that makes other teams mad when you meet them down the road, but I always thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, I think that anger of being picked probably goes away in like 5 minutes. Like the other team might start a 10-2 run in game 1, and then after that it's over. Daniel, I agree with you on Lowry. He has an interesting question about next year. We've hinted at this for a while. I think you've talked about it relative to making moves in the offseason and how you might look at the future. But PJ Tucker and what his contract looks like next year, is he a must re-sign based on where the salary structure of this team is? Because how it's currently constructed, it's hard to see how this team can hit a ceiling without him. So is he a must re-sign, or is it one of those where you kind of let him test the waters a little bit and you may look to even upgrade with a higher profile, almost like a star caliber player at that spot?
It's sort of a case, Clay, of can he be re-signed? Because if you're going to be over the cap and you're going to be limited in your options, PJ Tucker has a player option, I believe $7.4 million. I believe the Heat, because of rules, a returning player can bump him up to about $8.4 million for the 22-23 season, can build him a nice 3-year package, $30 million. We're not bad for a player at 36 years old. So whether that's enough, whether the Heat want to go out years, but if he wants a 1-year payoff, if he wants to take someone's full mid-level at $11 million or $15 million in cap space, the Heat can't go there. And if the Heat give him the full mid-level, they can't give it to Caleb Martin. Now, I'm not saying that Caleb Martin is more valuable than PJ Tucker, but he could have more value down the road if you're building a multi-year contract. So it's, one thing I've always find fascinating, players fall in love with their teams. We've seen this a lot, and they still leave. Jay Crowder loved the Heat. Mm-hmm. He felt reborn when he went to those NBA finals. It was everything he ever wanted after all those years in Dallas and Cleveland and Boston and Utah and Memphis and bouncing around the league. And he still left for the money. PJ Tucker reminds me a lot of Jay Crowder, that whole mood. Jay Crowder, the end before they had the COVID stoppage and then the bubble, could not be more effusive about the players in the locker room, his teammates, and Bam and Jimmy and Eric Spoelstra, and he still wound up leaving. So I think at the end of the day, money still talks. And I think when you're a 36-year-old player going on 37, and you might get a last bite at the apple when you've not made a ton of money relative to the NBA, I think it's going to be interesting. Then Spoelstra has to say to himself, could I try the Yurtseven and Bam combination and play big at the 4-5? Or if Victor Oladipo comes back, can I try small ball and play Jimmy a little more at the 4? So Eric Spoelstra is going to be in his lab with his analytics people crunching those numbers, and PJ Tucker's agent's going to gauge the market. Yeah, I think this could be Jay Crowder 2.0. The player loves the team loves the players, and a lot of times, like in marriage, the money gets in the way.
Well, and look, it'll be PJ Tucker 2.0 because he did the same thing after leaving Milwaukee last year. And look, none of us, we would all do the same thing. I would do the same thing. I've gotten to know you. I think you would do the same thing because it's you, as you get older and you have a family, you have an obligation to your family. Sure. And it's not just your wife, your kids, even if you're not married. I mean, you're talking about having to support a large support structure in your family. So you understand that side of it. It doesn't change your feelings towards the organization. But look, Jay Crowder was an integral part, not just of the Heat, but also the Phoenix Suns team last year that went to the NBA Finals. And frankly, the team that I think is the favorite to win it all again this year. I think that Phoenix team is fantastic. When I say again, I mean, get back there, but I think they win it this year, unlike they did last year. So you understand that side of it. The other side of it is, some of the names that you've seen mentioned linked to the Heat, they're gonna cost money, and it's not just going to be, hey, you trade out one contract and bring in another. It hamstrings you with what you're going to be able to do. So if you start to hear names like Bradley Beal, I mean, we heard Brandon Ingram for a while. I mean, there could be any number of directions.
You know what? I'm going to give you a name to give people perspective. There was a point going into free agency when we thought a certain. I'm going to give you a little clues here. I know we're getting up to the break. Who everyone thought was washed, was in the Western Conference on a go-nowhere team, they thought he had aged out and might be a mid-level player. Any clue who I'm thinking about?
What position?
He's playing small forward now, but he's been a guard most of his career. Give you the clues
So
here.
wing player.
Western Conference last year, came to the Eastern Conference. I'll make it really easy. And was at FTX Arena on Monday.
Oh, yeah, DeMar DeRozan. Yeah,
People last year at this time, if we were doing our Slomin's, home security inside the paint show in July
I
and
remember
August.
people talking about him taking the exception. And
Yes,
now he's an
no,
MVP
that's what I'm getting. People going, well, the Heat could do all this and then get DeRozan for the mid-level. Well, DeMar DeRozan showed, remember when he got that Chicago contract and people said, what the hell are the Bulls thinking? All that money to Lonzo Ball, all that money to DeMar DeRozan, they're a bunch of nitwits. And it worked out perfectly. So a lot of times we sit here in February and March and April and we say, well, there's always this cheap option. No, that cheap option ultimately winds up getting his market value. And DeMar DeRozan became a value contract for the Chicago Bulls. So don't cast aside the Caleb Martins and the PJ Tuckers and say to yourself, well, there's always player X, Y, and Z. At the end of the day, player X, Y, and Z tend to get taken care of also. That's why there's a salary cap. That's why they try to distribute things evenly. So you can't just get all these mid-level guys you think you can. And the market bore that out. And DeMar DeRozan certainly has shown whatever dollar Chicago spent were dollars well spent.
And let me add one more to that. I mean, to go along the lines of like, hey, you have to do things within the structure of a salary cap, et cetera, et cetera. Look what's happening to the Lakers right now. And I mean, if they're not showing the importance of having those guys on either mid-level contract, role players matter so much, man. And look, I'm not somebody that goes back and says, oh, well, I told you so, whatever, because I'm probably wrong a lot more than I'm right. The Russell Westbrook thing never made sense there at all. You can't just throw in stars and expect it to work.
And they could have had CJ McCollum for less, and he would have been the shooter that he needed. So LeBron's not pulling the trigger on 28-foot three-pointers. You're absolutely right, Clay.
Yeah, and so don't underestimate and this to bring it full circle and go back to the question. You can't necessarily underestimate the value of the PJ Tucker when you're talking about, hey, mixing, matching salaries, bringing in a star. That might matter. It's just that the Heat may not be able to, based on where they are cap-wise, because other teams may be offering more. Some other great questions, great comments. We're going to get to them after the break. Plus, we're going to preview the big games coming up starting tonight in Milwaukee. Is this a preview of the Eastern Conference Finals? Is tomorrow night a preview of the Eastern Conference Finals? Is Saturday night? Are none of them? We'll get to all that next right here on Inside the Paint.